Ryan had always lived a quiet life on the edge of the colony. His home was small, built from local stone and reinforced with metal plates shipped from Earth. It was not fancy, but it was enough for him. He liked the silence, the sound of the wind brushing over the dry plains, and the view of the twin moons rising together at night. Most humans who came to this planet lived in groups, but Ryan preferred distance. He worked as a mechanic, fixing broken tools for farmers and traders. That gave him enough food and supplies to survive. Life might have gone on in this simple way if not for the Council's new decision. The alien council that ruled this part of the colony announced that every human living alone must be given an assistant. They believed humans were too careless with their health, too disorganized with their lives, and needed help. Some humans laughed at the rule, while others argued against it. Ryan, however, was quiet as always. When they told him he would be assigned an alien maid, he only nodded. On the morning of her arrival, Ryan stood outside his house. The sky was pale blue, the air cold with the smell of dust after last night's storm. He saw a small transport gliding over the horizon, leaving a trail of thin smoke. It landed not far from his home, and out stepped a tall figure dressed in a long gray uniform. The alien woman walked with steady steps, her eyes sharp and serious. She was taller than Ryan, with long limbs and skin that shimmered faintly in the sunlight. She carried a small bag on her back, and when she stopped in front of him, she bowed her head slightly. "I am Lyra," she said in a firm voice. "I have been assigned as your maid. I will serve in your house, keep it clean, prepare food, and guard your health." Ryan raised his eyebrows. "Guard my health?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "The Council believes humans do not take care of themselves properly. My role is to ensure your safety." Ryan almost smiled, but he did not want to offend her. Instead, he simply stepped aside and motioned to his door. "Then come in. This is your duty now, I suppose." Lyra entered his home and immediately began inspecting every corner. She moved like a soldier, straight-backed and alert, as if checking a battlefield. Her eyes lingered on the tools scattered across his workbench, the unwashed cup on the table, the pile of old clothes in the corner. "This will not do," she said. Ryan sighed. "I live alone. It does not need to be perfect." But Lyra was already moving. She began to fold his clothes with precise hands, stacking them into perfect squares. She cleaned his cup and placed it neatly on a shelf. She rearranged his tools by size and type, placing each in a perfect row. Ryan watched in silence. It was not just cleaning. It was more like preparation for inspection. He felt as if his home had been turned into a training camp in only a few minutes. When she finished, she turned back to him. "Now the space is acceptable." "You really take this seriously," Ryan said. Lyra looked at him with calm eyes. "When the Council gives an order, it must be followed with full effort. I do not play with duty." Her words carried a weight that made Ryan pause. He realized she was not here just to sweep floors or cook meals. To her, this was a mission. Later that evening, Lyra began preparing food. She studied his supplies carefully, measuring everything as if she were mixing medicine. She boiled water, added grains, and served the meal in a strict portion. When she placed the bowl in front of Ryan, it looked more like something a soldier would eat in the field rather than a home-cooked meal. Ryan tasted it. It was plain, but not bad. "You know," he said carefully, "food is not only for health. Sometimes it is for comfort." She tilted her head. "Comfort is weakness. Food is for strength." Ryan shook his head, amused. He could already see this was going to be an unusual arrangement. That night, when he was ready to sleep, he heard movement outside. He looked through the window and saw Lyra standing in the dark, her posture straight, her eyes scanning the land around his home. She was keeping watch, as if enemies might attack at any moment. Opening the door, he called to her. "What are you doing out there?" "My duty," she answered without turning. "I will make sure no danger reaches this house while you sleep." "There is no danger," he said. "This land is quiet. Nothing happens here." Her reply was steady. "Danger hides when not expected. I will remain here." Ryan could have argued, but he saw the iron resolve in her stance. Instead, he sighed again and returned inside. Perhaps she would tire of this strict behavior after a few days. But deep inside, he felt curious. Why would someone treat the role of a maid like guarding a fortress? As he lay in bed, he thought about her words. Duty, order, strength. To Lyra, this was not service, it was honor. He wondered how long it would take before her seriousness clashed with his simple, quiet life. He had no answer, but he knew one thing: his days would no longer be silent or ordinary. For the first time in years, Ryan felt that his life might change. And outside, under the pale light of the moons, Lyra stood watch, her shadow tall against the cold ground, guarding a human she barely knew as if he were the center of her mission. Morning light crept across the horizon, painting the sky in soft gold. Ryan woke to the smell of boiled roots and fresh water heating on the fire. When he stepped into the main room, he found Lyra already awake, standing tall beside the table. The floor was spotless, the tools polished, and the clothes folded into neat stacks. "You wake early," Ryan said with a yawn. "A caretaker must rise before the one they serve," Lyra answered firmly. He sat down and looked at the food she had prepared. It was simple again, just as last night, but the portions were carefully measured. She placed the bowl in front of him and then stood nearby, watching as he ate. "You know you can sit down," Ryan said, feeling awkward under her gaze. "I will remain standing," she replied. "It is my role to serve, not to share." Ryan sighed. "You really do take this too seriously." Lyra tilted her head slightly, not insulted but puzzled. "The council gave me orders. I must follow them with precision. Disorder is weakness." Ryan decided not to argue further. He had already learned that when Lyra set her mind on something, it was nearly impossible to change it. Still, he could not help but smile at the way she stacked even empty bowls in a perfect line after he finished eating. When he went to his workshop to repair a broken farming tool, Lyra followed. She stood beside the door, her eyes scanning the field as though she expected danger. At first, Ryan ignored her, but soon her presence made him speak. "You do not need to stand guard while I work. Nobody comes here. Threats appear when least expected," Lyra said without moving. "I have lived here for years," Ryan replied, holding up the tool. "The only threat I face is rust." Lyra's eyes shifted to him. "Rust is also an enemy. It destroys slowly. It must be fought." Ryan almost laughed, but he stopped himself. To her, every small thing seemed like part of a larger battle. By midday, he noticed another habit of hers. Lyra inspected his water barrel, checking the cover and measuring the level. She then looked at his food supplies, counting each sack of grain and each root. When she saw some cracked containers, she frowned. "These are unfit for storage. You risk spoilage," she said. Ryan rubbed his neck. They have been fine until now. Fine is not enough, Lyra said sharply. I will replace them. Without asking further, she carried the containers outside. She used her own tools, crafting tight seals with efficiency. Ryan stood nearby, amazed at the speed of her hands. It was like watching a builder at work. When she finished, the containers looked new. Ryan nodded. I must admit, you are good at this. Lyra gave no smile, only a short answer. It is duty. The day passed with her repeating this pattern. She cleaned, repaired, and organized with exact precision. She even straightened the small stones outside his doorway so they formed a perfect path. Every time Ryan thought she might rest, she found another task. By evening, Ryan was tired from watching her endless effort. He sat by the fire, stretching his arms. Lyra placed another carefully portioned meal in front of him. Again she stood, waiting silently as he ate. Finally, Ryan put down his bowl. Lyra, you do not need to treat me like a commander. I am just a man who lives alone. Her eyes fixed on him. The council gave me the role of your maid. Maid means one who cares for another. To care means to protect, to prepare, to ensure strength. That is what I will do. Ryan rubbed his forehead. Maid also means someone who helps with simple things. It does not mean you must turn my home into a military base. Lyra looked thoughtful for the first time. She did not argue right away. Instead, she said, perhaps humans use the word differently. But I must do more than sweep floors. If I do less, I dishonor my assignment. Ryan leaned back, staring into the fire. You know, sometimes living is not about duty. Sometimes it is about peace. You should try it. She remained silent, watching the flames. For a moment, her strict expression softened, but only for a breath. Then she straightened again. Peace comes after order. Not before. That night, Ryan thought she might finally rest, but when he went outside, he saw her once again standing guard under the twin moons. Her shadow stretched across the ground like a silent sentinel. Lyra, he called gently, you are allowed to sleep. You do not need to protect me from the wind and the night. She turned her head slightly. If danger comes while I sleep, I fail my duty. There is no danger here, Ryan insisted. She shook her head. Danger does not announce itself. It arrives without warning. I will not allow it. Ryan looked at her and knew arguing would not change her mind. He sighed, then walked back inside. Yet even as he closed the door, he could not shake a strange feeling. Part of him was annoyed, but another part felt a quiet comfort. Someone was watching over him, even if too much. Days passed, and her routine became clear. At dawn, she cleaned and cooked. At noon, she inspected supplies. At evening, she guarded his home. And at night, she stood watch under the stars. She spoke little unless he asked questions, but every word was steady, without hesitation. Ryan found himself torn. On one hand, her seriousness made life feel heavy, as if every small act carried the weight of a war. On the other hand, his home had never been so safe, so clean, and so well ordered. One evening, as he worked on a broken machine, he looked up and found her watching him again, her sharp eyes calm but focused. You really do not get tired, do you? He asked. I cannot allow myself to, she replied. Ryan shook his head, a small smile on his lips. You may be my maid, Lyra, but sometimes it feels like I am the guest in my own house. For the first time, her face softened into something close to amusement. It was not quite a smile, but her eyes held a spark of interest. Perhaps that is the way it must be, she said quietly. Ryan did not answer. He simply turned back to his work. Yet in his mind, he wondered how long her strictness would last, and whether one day she might learn that life was more than duty. For now, though, his days had changed. The silence he once lived in was gone, replaced by the sound of careful steps, sharp eyes, and the steady presence of someone who treated even sweeping the floor like guarding a kingdom. And though he would never admit it aloud, Ryan was beginning to feel that perhaps his lonely life was not so lonely anymore. The sun rose slowly across the colony plains, painting the sky in red and gold. Ryan opened his eyes and stretched. He had grown used to the sound of footsteps outside his window. It was always Lyra, pacing the ground with steady rhythm as she watched the horizon. Her sense of duty never rested. When he stepped out that morning, she was already standing tall, scanning the distance with sharp eyes. Her long shadow stretched across the stones she had neatly arranged at the entrance. "You did not sleep again," Ryan said. "I rested for 3 breaths," she answered calmly. "That is enough." "It is not enough for anyone," Ryan replied. "You cannot live without proper rest." Her voice was steady. "My body is trained for long watch. My duty is more important than sleep." Ryan shook his head. He knew it was useless to argue. Instead, he went back inside and found his breakfast ready. She had boiled roots again, sliced into equal pieces, and set water beside them. Everything was in straight lines, even the spoons. He sat down and began to eat. Lyra remained standing, as always. Her eyes never drifted from the window. Ryan finally put his spoon down. "You know, if someone came here to harm me, I would want you to fight after being well rested. Not half awake from guarding shadows." Lyra turned to him, her face calm but serious. "I will not fail, whether rested or not. Failure is worse than exhaustion." Ryan let out a quiet sigh. He had learned something over the last few days. Lyra was not only serious about her role. She was overprotective. She did not see herself as a maid. She saw herself as a soldier guarding her commander. Later that morning, Ryan went to visit his neighbor, a farmer named Solution Soul often traded roots and herbs for repairs. As Ryan walked along the dusty road, Lyra walked beside him, her long steps quiet but steady. Her eyes scanned the land constantly, as if each rock and shadow might hide an enemy. When they reached Soul's farm, the man greeted Ryan warmly. "Good to see you, Ryan. The new helper the council gave you looks strong." Ryan smiled politely. "Yes, she is, dedicated." While Ryan and Soul spoke about tools and harvests, Lyra kept her distance. But when Soul's dog ran toward them, barking happily, she stepped forward like a wall. The dog stopped in its tracks, tail wagging, but Lyra raised her hand in warning. "It is only a dog," Ryan said quickly. "He will not harm us." Lyra did not move until the animal turned away. Her shoulders relaxed only when it was gone. Soul chuckled nervously. "Your maid has sharp eyes." "Too sharp," Ryan muttered under his breath. On the way back, Ryan tried to explain. "Not every creature is a danger. Sometimes a bark is only a bark." "Every sound must be measured," Lyra answered. "To ignore one may cost everything." Her words were calm, but there was a steel edge in them. Ryan realized then that she had probably lived her whole life in strict training. To her, the world was filled with threats waiting to strike. That evening, a group of children from the colony passed near Ryan's home. They laughed and played, chasing one another across the dusty field. One child came too close to the doorway and tripped on the stones. Before Ryan could move, Lyra was there, pulling the child back with firm hands. "Do not cross this line," she said sternly. The children froze, eyes wide. Ryan rushed forward. "They are only playing, Lyra. They mean no harm." Her gaze stayed on the children until they ran off, frightened. Ryan turned to her. "You cannot guard me from every step of life. People will come near. That is normal." She answered firmly. "No step is harmless until proven harmless. I will not allow strangers to approach carelessly." Ryan felt frustration rising in him. "If you keep scaring everyone away, soon no one will visit me at all." Lyra met his eyes without flinching. "Then you will be safer." Her words left him speechless. He could not decide if she was protecting him or trapping him. That night, the stars shone bright above the plains. Ryan sat outside, trying to enjoy the cool air. Lyra stood nearby, her eyes fixed on the dark fields. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Ryan spoke. "Lyra, do you even understand what it means to live peacefully? To trust the world a little?" Her head turned slowly. "Trust is weakness. Peace is only a pause before the next fight." Ryan looked at her in disbelief. "You cannot live like that forever. A life without trust is no life at all." For the first time, her face softened. She looked away at the stars. "I was raised to protect, not to rest. I know no other way." Ryan's anger faded. In her eyes, he saw not pride but a quiet loneliness. She was trapped by her own sense of duty. The days that followed only deepened her overprotective nature. She inspected every visitor, every animal, even the wind itself. She positioned stones to mark invisible borders around the house. She checked his water 3 times a day. She followed him wherever he went, her steps silent but constant. At first, Ryan felt suffocated. But slowly, another feeling began to grow. Beneath her stern eyes and endless rules, he saw something else. She was not only guarding him. She was afraid of failing him. One evening, as they shared the firelight, he said softly, "Lyra, I do not need a shield around me every moment. I need someone beside me, not just in front of me." She looked at him long, her eyes unreadable. Then she lowered her head slightly. "Perhaps I do not yet understand the meaning of Maid in your way. But I will learn." It was a small step, but Ryan felt hope in it. She might be overprotective, but maybe, just maybe, she could change. For now, though, the night was quiet, and her shadow still stood tall against the stars, guarding him as always. The colony had always been quiet, but silence never lasted forever. For weeks, Lyra had stood watch each night, her sharp eyes fixed on the horizon. Ryan often thought she was imagining dangers that did not exist. But one evening, her warning became real. The sky was dim, painted with red clouds as the twin moons began to rise. Ryan sat near the fire outside, repairing a broken lantern. Lyra stood as always, her tall frame steady and still. Suddenly, her head snapped to the east. Her hand went to the staff she carried across her back. "What is it now?" Ryan asked with a sigh, not even looking up. "Movement," she said firmly. Ryan laughed quietly. Probably another wild dog. You scare them away every night. But then he followed her gaze. On the far ridge, shapes were moving against the fading light. Dark figures, low and fast, heading toward the colony. Ryan's smile faded. Raiders. Yes, Lyra said. Her voice was calm but her stance sharpened. They come for supplies. They always come when the moons rise. Ryan stood quickly. We should warn the others. The council has guards. By the time the guards arrive, the raiders will be here, Lyra said. You must stay inside. She pulled her staff free and stepped in front of him. Her eyes glowed faintly in the firelight, hard and steady. Ryan swallowed. Lyra, there are too many of them. You cannot fight alone. She turned her head slightly toward him. My duty is not to fight them all. My duty is to make sure none of them touch you. Her words sent a chill down his spine. He had seen her overprotective before, but now he saw her in full resolve. She was ready to stand against anything. The figures grew closer. Ryan could now hear them shouts in a harsh tongue, the thud of boots across the dirt. He felt panic rise, but Lyra stood like stone, unshaken. Get inside, she commanded. But instead of obeying, Ryan grabbed a torch from the fire. If they reach this house, I will not hide. Lyra's eyes flickered, surprised, but she said nothing. Her grip tightened on her staff. The first raiders came into view. They were broad, with heavy armor patched from scraps, and weapons that looked like sharp iron mixed with bone. Their eyes glowed yellow in the moonlight. They laughed when they saw the small human house. One shouted to the others, supplies. Easy take. But when they moved closer, they froze. In front of the doorway stood a tall alien woman with a long staff, her expression sharp as a blade. And beside her, a human holding a torch that burned bright. Lyra's voice cut through the night. Leave this place. The raiders laughed louder. One stepped forward, raising his weapon. Move aside. The food and tools are ours. Ryan's heart pounded, but he lifted the torch higher. This is my home. You will not take it? The raiders were startled by his defiance. Most humans hid during raids. Few stood in the open. Lyra shifted her stance and struck the ground with her staff, the sound echoing across the stones. The first raider charged. Lyra moved fast, striking his weapon aside and sweeping his legs out from under him. He crashed to the ground. Before he could rise, she placed the end of her staff at his throat. Next one who steps forward will not rise again, she warned. The other raiders hesitated, but greed and pride pushed them on. Two came together, swinging their crude blades. Ryan's instinct screamed at him to run, but he held his torch firm. He swung it toward one raider, forcing him to stumble back as the flame licked close. Fire was a thing all raiders feared, for it spread too quickly across their rough gear. At the same time, Lyra fought the other. She blocked his strike with smooth skill, then struck his shoulder with the staff, sending him spinning to the ground. Her movements were precise, like every attack was part of a lesson she had practiced for years. Ryan's torch flickered, but he pushed forward, jabbing the flame toward the raider who tried to grab him. The man cursed and stumbled back. Ryan felt his heart pounding harder than ever before, yet there was a strange strength in him. He was not just watching anymore. He was fighting beside her. The remaining raiders began to retreat. They had expected an easy target, but they found a pair standing firm. One of them shouted, calling the others back. Slowly, the dark figures vanished into the ridge, their voices fading with the wind. Silence returned, broken only by Ryan's heavy breathing. He lowered the torch, his hands trembling. Lyra stood tall, her staff still steady, her eyes scanning the horizon until she was certain the danger had passed. "They will not return tonight," she said finally. Ryan sank onto the stone step, wiping sweat from his brow. "I thought I was going to die." Lyra looked at him with calm eyes. "You were never in danger while I stood here." Ryan gave a weak laugh. "You sound so sure." "I am sure," she said simply. "My duty is clear." He looked at her, really looked at her. She had faced down a group of raiders without fear. She had stood like a wall between him and danger. And yet, she was more than just a soldier. She was someone who believed completely in her role. "You could have left me," he said quietly. "But you stayed." "I was assigned to you," she replied. "Until my duty ends, I will not leave." Her words were cold in tone but warm in meaning. Ryan felt something stir inside him, something he had not felt in years. Trust. That night, as he lay in bed, he thought about the fight. He had seen her strength before, but now he understood the depth of her resolve. She was not only overprotective. She was unbreakable. Outside, under the twin moons, Lyra stood again in her watchful stance. But this time, she glanced once toward the window where Ryan slept. For the first time, she felt that her mission was not just duty. It was choice. The raid had passed, but its memory lingered in the colony. Farmers whispered about the night when raiders came and were driven away not by guards, but by one human and his alien maid. Some spoke with awe, others with disbelief. But for Ryan, the memory was still fresh in his chest, like a flame that refused to go out. The next morning, he rose earlier than usual. His body ached from the struggle, and his hands were sore from holding the torch, but his heart felt strangely alive. He stepped outside and saw Lyra, as always, standing watch. Her staff rested against her shoulder, her eyes sweeping the horizon. She looked exactly the same as every other morning, calm and steady. Yet when she turned her gaze to him, there was something different in her eyes. "You should still be resting," she said. "And you should be resting more than anyone," Ryan replied. "I require little," she answered simply. Ryan walked closer. "Last night, I stood with you. I was afraid, but I did not hide. Did you notice?" Her eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger but in thought. "Yes. You held the torch." "And I used it," Ryan added. "I helped." Lyra was quiet for a long moment. Then she said softly, "You did more than help. You showed no training, no weapon, yet you faced them. I did not expect this from you." Ryan let out a small laugh. "You thought I would run." She tilted her head slightly. "Humans value survival. Most would hide. But you stood. That is not survival. That is courage." Her voice was calm, but the words carried weight. For the first time, Ryan saw respect in her eyes. Not the respect of a soldier for her commander, but something deeper. As the day passed, Lyra continued her duties. She cleaned, she inspected, she stood guard. But her sharpness toward him seemed less rigid. When she placed food on the table, she did not stand quite as far. When she stacked his tools, she allowed one or two to remain in his preferred place instead of forcing her perfect order. Ryan noticed, but he said nothing. He only watched, curious. Later that day, they walked together to the nearby well. The colony had gathered there, talking about the raid. Some of the people nodded to Ryan, a few even called out thanks. He was not used to attention, and it made him uncomfortable. One man asked, "Ryan, how did you stand against them? You had no blade." Ryan shrugged. "I had fire. That was enough." Another laughed. Still, not many would face raiders with only a torch. Beside him, Lyra spoke in her firm tone. It was not the torch. It was the one who carried it. The people grew silent for a moment, surprised to hear her speak with such certainty. Ryan glanced at her, and she met his eyes without hesitation. He saw in her expression something rare pride. When they returned home, Ryan set down the bucket of water and said, "You defended me, but you also saw me defend myself. Maybe I am not as fragile as you thought." Lyra stood still, then gave a slow nod. "You are not fragile. You are different. Humans fight in ways I do not understand." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" "You burn," she said. "Not only with fire, but inside. You fight even when you should fall back. You protect even when you should run. That is not logic. That is something else." Ryan smiled faintly. "We call it stubbornness sometimes." She shook her head. "It is more than that. It is a strength no counsel can assign, no training can teach. It is human." Her words stayed with him all evening. That night, the fire crackled inside the house. Ryan sat by the glow, fixing a broken lantern again. Lyra sat nearby, her staff resting against the wall. She did not stand guard this time. She sat as if she allowed herself to be still for once. Ryan looked at her. "You always say duty, duty, duty. But tonight you sit. Why?" Lyra was quiet, then answered, "Because I saw you fight. Because I saw you burn with fire. I realized you do not need me to guard every breath. You have strength I had not seen before." Ryan leaned back, thoughtful. "So you finally trust me a little." "I trust that you will not break easily," she said. It was not much, but to Ryan, it felt like a great step. He smiled into the firelight. For the first time since her arrival, silence between them did not feel heavy. It felt calm. The days after the raid changed both of them. The colony treated Ryan differently, speaking to him with more respect. But more than that, Lyra treated him differently too. She still guarded, still cleaned, still prepared food with military precision. Yet she no longer watched him as if he were fragile glass. She watched him as if he were a partner. One evening, when the twin moons rose again, Ryan walked outside with a torch in hand. Lyra followed, as always. He looked at her and held the torch high. "Last time, this flame kept them away," he said. "Do you know why?" "Because raiders fear fire," she answered. Ryan shook his head. "Because I was not afraid to use it. Fire means nothing unless someone chooses to hold it. That is the human touch. We make tools into more than tools. We make courage out of weakness." Lyra's eyes softened. She looked at him long, then finally said, "Then perhaps it is not I who guard you. Perhaps it is you who teaches me." Ryan chuckled. "I never thought I would teach my maid." She gave no smile, but her eyes carried a quiet warmth. "You are not only my assignment. You are my lesson." The night stretched around them, cool and silent. But for the first time, Lyra did not stand apart as a sentinel. She stood closer, as if sharing the same fire. Ryan felt the change deeply. He had thought she was only a protector, cold and unbending. But now he saw that beneath her armor of duty, there was someone learning, someone watching him not as a commander or a burden, but as a human who carried a flame strong enough to guide even her. And as the firelight flickered across their faces, the bond between them grew, not built on orders, not built on fear, but built on courage, trust, and the human touch that even the strictest duty could not ignore. The colony had regained its quiet rhythm, but Ryan could sense tension in the air. Rumors had spread about the raiders' retreat and their anger at failing to seize the humans' home. Traders whispered that the raiders would return, stronger and with more numbers. Ryan rose before the twin moons appeared, rubbing his hands. He glanced at Lyra, who stood at the edge of the yard, eyes scanning the horizon. Her posture was straight, her staff in hand. She did not speak, but her presence carried the same unspoken warning, "Be ready." "I think they may come back," Ryan said quietly. "They will," Lyra answered. "When prey is strong, hunters return with more force." Ryan nodded. He had come to accept her logic, harsh as it seemed. He also knew that this time, he could not stay behind. He had seen what she could do, but he could no longer be the passive one protected by her strength alone. Throughout the morning, they prepared. Lyra organized the supplies and checked the weapons Ryan had kept for emergencies. She demonstrated the proper way to hold a torch in defense, instructing him how to swing it without losing balance. Ryan followed her guidance, practicing each move. He stumbled a few times, but each time, Lyra corrected his stance with calm patience. "You will need steadiness," she said. "Fear will make mistakes. Confidence will make fire." Ryan chuckled at her choice of words. "I hope confidence will keep me from burning myself as well." By mid-afternoon, dark shapes appeared along the ridge. Ryan's stomach tightened. Lyra raised her staff, and Ryan gripped his torch tighter. He realized that this was more than a test. This was a fight for survival, not only for him, but for the life he had built here. The first raider charged, swinging a spiked club. Lyra moved before the man reached the gate, striking his weapon aside and pushing him back with a strong shove. Ryan swung the torch toward another attacker, forcing him to stumble as flames brushed against his armor. "You are brave," Lyra said quietly, though loud enough for him to hear. "Do not waste it with hesitation." Ryan's heart raced, but her words steadied him. He felt his fear change into action, and for the first time, he felt that fire inside himself, not just the flame in his hand, but courage that burned stronger than he had ever imagined. The raiders advanced in a line. Lyra moved with precision, her staff striking weapons aside, pushing them back step by step. Ryan used his torch cleverly, not to burn, but to create barriers, forcing the raiders to slow their charge. His human instincts, combined with her training, formed a seamless rhythm. "Do not let them surround you," Lyra commanded. "Stand together, not apart." Ryan nodded and moved closer to her, mirroring her stance. They were no longer Maid and human. They were partners. Every strike from Lyra was met by his clever maneuvering, every barrier he created allowed her to move freely. One raider broke through and lunged at Ryan. The human reacted quickly, swinging the torch in a wide arc, and the raider fell backward, cursing. Lyra struck the last attacker with her staff, sending him spinning to the ground. The raiders hesitated, seeing that their small plan was failing again. Ryan realized something new. He was not just relying on her strength. He was thinking, acting, and fighting in a way he had never done before. Lyra had taught him much without speaking of lessons. Courage had become instinct, fire had become his ally. The raiders finally retreated. They ran into the hills, leaving behind weapons and shouts. The night returned to silence, broken only by the crackle of Ryan's fire. Breathing heavily, Ryan lowered the torch. "We did it," he said, his voice trembling from both fear and excitement. Lyra's eyes swept the horizon before she turned to him. "We did. Together." For the first time, her voice carried warmth, not just duty. Ryan felt relief, but also something else: pride. He had not only survived, he had contributed, and she had seen it. When the stars rose fully, Lyra finally sat beside him by the fire. Her staff rested against her shoulder. She spoke quietly, "You have strength I did not expect. Humans carry a fire that no skill can create. I see it now." Ryan smiled, feeling exhaustion and joy at the same time. "You taught me more than defense. You showed me how to stand, how to face fear. I am stronger because of you." She gave a small nod, her usual seriousness softened. "And I am learning. Strength is not only in guarding others. Sometimes it is in letting them rise beside you." Ryan felt that her words were meant for both of them. She had grown from a maid of duty into a partner of choice. He realized that the bond between them had changed completely. It was no longer command and obedience, but respect and trust. For several days after, the colony remained quiet. The raiders had been forced to regroup, and no one dared return so quickly. Ryan and Lyra worked together to repair the damage to the home and reinforce defenses, not out of fear, but as preparation for what might come. Every task, from carrying supplies to arranging stones, was done side by side. At night, Ryan often looked at Lyra, sitting calmly by the fire or standing watch. He understood her more now than ever. Her strictness was not coldness, it was care. Her overprotectiveness was not arrogance, it was loyalty. And her strength had taught him that courage could exist even in the smallest human. "You no longer treat me as fragile," Ryan said one evening. "I never saw you as fragile," Lyra replied. "I only wanted to be sure. Now I see you can stand." He laughed softly. "I never thought a maid would teach me that." She gave a quiet, almost imperceptible smile. "And I never thought a human would teach me to see strength beyond duty." Together, they sat by the fire, watching the stars. The twin moons reflected on the smooth stones of the yard, and the home felt safe and alive. It was no longer just a shelter, it was a place of shared courage, a place where human fire and alien resolve stood together. And outside, though she still occasionally glanced at the horizon, Lyra no longer only guarded. She watched not with fear, but with partnership. They had survived the raiders, not because one was stronger than the other, but because they fought together. In that quiet moment, Ryan understood that home was not only walls and fire. It was trust. It was courage. And it was the bond they had formed, human and alien, standing side by side. The colony was calm again. Days passed without threat, and the people began to trust that peace could last. But Ryan noticed a change not in the land, but in himself and in Lyra. The human who had once lived quietly alone now felt alive with purpose. And the alien who had arrived as a strict, overprotective maid now moved differently, lighter and more aware. Morning light filtered through the window. Ryan stood by the door, stretching. Lyra was already outside, her staff leaning against the stones as she arranged firewood for the day. The way she moved was still careful, precise, but there was something softer in her steps. She no longer looked as if she expected a threat with every breeze. You no longer scan the horizon as if raiders will come at any moment, Ryan said, smiling. She turned and gave a small nod. I still watch. But I also see the calm. I have learned it is not weakness to trust the world sometimes. Ryan laughed softly. That is a big change from the first day you arrived. Perhaps humans can teach lessons as well as aliens, she said calmly. They spent the morning together, tending to the home. Lyra moved with her usual care, cleaning and arranging, but she allowed small imperfections. Ryan noticed this and realized she was no longer trying to force perfection. She understood that life could exist with small flaws and still be strong. Around midday, the people of the colony came to visit. They carried gifts of fruit and vegetables, some small tools, and plenty of curiosity. Ryan had never had visitors like this. Lyra stood to the side, observing quietly. The visitors bowed slightly to her out of respect. Some whispered, she defended him alone. She is amazing. Ryan smiled awkwardly. She was amazing, yes. But we fought together. Lyra stepped forward and looked at the colony people. I was assigned to care for him. I protected him. But he is not weak. Humans carry a fire inside them that I have learned to respect. There was a pause as everyone considered her words. Then one elder nodded slowly. You have grown together. That is what makes strength. Not just skill, but trust. Ryan looked at Lyra. She did not look like a maid now. She looked like a partner, someone who had shared battles, someone who had taught him courage and learned from his own fire. The day passed with conversation and laughter. Lyra participated more than usual, answering questions and sharing her experiences from her world. She described her training, her strict life, and the rules she had always followed. The people listened with fascination. Ryan watched her and felt pride. She had transformed from a rigid, overprotective guardian into someone who could engage, who could trust, and who could teach others without fear. When the visitors left, Ryan and Lyra returned to the house. He handed her a cup of water and gestured for her to sit. For the first time, she did not stand. She accepted the seat quietly, her staff resting beside her. You have changed, Ryan said softly. She tilted her head. Perhaps I have learned something about humans. Perhaps I have learned something about myself. Duty is important. But so is choice. I choose now to be more than a maid. Ryan felt warmth in his chest. More than a maid. Yes, she said, looking directly at him. A maid follows orders. I served because I was assigned. But now I serve because I wish to. Because I care for you and this home. Because I respect what you are and what we can be together. Ryan smiled. Then you are my partner, not only my helper. Her eyes softened, and for the first time, a small smile appeared on her face. If you say so. They spent the evening preparing food together. Lyra taught Ryan some of her methods, not to correct him, but to share knowledge. Ryan showed her human tricks, ways to cook faster and make meals taste better. They laughed quietly at their mistakes and celebrated small successes. The house no longer felt like a place of rigid order. It was alive with conversation, movement, and warmth. Later, Ryan stepped outside. Lyra followed. The twin moons hung high above, their light reflecting on the smooth stones of the yard. They stood silently for a moment, watching the quiet plains. "You have changed my life," Ryan said softly. "And you have changed mine," Lyra replied. The air was cool and still. Ryan realized that the quiet home he had once treasured had become a place of strength, trust, and connection. It was no longer only about walls, fire, or protection. It was about the bond they had formed, human and alien, courage and skill, warmth and discipline. Lyra looked at him carefully. "I understand now. Being assigned to someone is not about control. It is about respect, learning, and choice. I am no longer only your maid. I am your ally." Ryan nodded, smiling at the simple but profound truth. "And I am grateful for it. More than words can say." They returned inside as the night grew deeper. Lyra carried her staff to the corner, but she did not stand guard this time. She allowed herself to rest. Ryan realized that she had found balance between duty and choice, between vigilance and trust. For the first time, he felt that their home was complete. The fire burned steadily in the hearth, the walls held warmth and light, and outside, the plains were calm. But most importantly, inside, they had found something stronger than order or skill. They had found partnership, trust, and respect. Days turned into weeks. Lyra continued her care, but it was different now. She laughed more easily, allowed imperfection, and shared tasks willingly. Ryan learned from her skill, while she learned from his courage and creativity. Together, they strengthened the home, defended it when necessary, and nurtured life within it. The colony noticed the change as well. People who had once feared the alien maid now approached with respect, seeing how she had become more than a servant. And Ryan, once a quiet man living alone, found himself part of a bond that was unshakable. In the evenings, they would often sit by the fire, quietly sharing stories or working side by side. Lyra no longer stood solely to guard. She was present. She was partner. She was friend. And Ryan had learned that strength was not only in protecting others but in sharing trust, courage, and care. The moons hung high, the stars shone bright, and in that quiet, safe home, Ryan and Lyra stood together. They had faced danger, learned from one another, and discovered that life was stronger when shared. The alien who had arrived as a strict, overprotective maid had transformed. She was no longer only a servant. She was an ally, a teacher, and a friend. And in her presence, Ryan had grown into a human who was brave, clever, and alive in a way he had never known. Together, they had built more than a home. They had built trust, courage, and a bond that would carry them through any challenge.